Welcome, everyone, to the Next Best Picture podcast, where we are talking with Colman Domingo, star of the new film Sing Sing. Colman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here, Daniel. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you. This movie, which is so beautiful, I saw it last year at the Toronto Film Festival and have been loving it ever since.
Thank you.
And you know, you play in this film a character named Divine G, who is based on a real person who
Yeah.
you got to speak with while you were preparing to play the role. And I'm curious, what did you learn from him in speaking with him in that prep work?
What a beautiful question. I learned so much about him, about what he did while he was on the inside and what made him, I don't know, hang on to hope. He's a very positive human being. He's someone who, even under the circumstances of being wrongly convicted of a crime, on the inside, he found what he did. He said he became a what's called a jailhouse lawyer. He was always in the law library, learning everything that he could, whether for his case or whether for fellow inmates' cases to help with their advocacy in every single way. He also attached himself to a program called RTA, Rehabilitation Through the Arts, where he was a founding member. And they would put on plays, and he really, created a safe space for people to interrogate their feelings and work past trauma and apply it to character and story. He became a playwright. He became a novelist. Um, I don't know. He did so many things that were so like showing that he still had the light inside of him. So I learned that about him, and so I think that helped teach me how to portray him, because I thought, here's someone who absolutely has been wronged by the system, who still believes the system can work. He said, if so, I think that he knowing if he's a knowledge is key to learn everything about this, and I can work within this system to work for others. So that told me a lot, all that I need to know about the guy. I just really thought, wow, that's a very hopeful person. Um, and the circumstance of being in prison did not kill his spirit.
Which is so beautiful to hear. Um, I was reading that Sean San Jose, who plays Mike in the film, had described your process as an actor as, quote, DNA work.
Mm.
And I'm wondering how you would describe your preparation process for a role.
For this role in particular, I think it took soul work. I think maybe that's what he's saying, DNA work, because it's closer to it's going underneath the hood of my soul and bringing that for John Divine G. Whitfield. Um, Finding what connects us. There's so many things that I think are similar in terms of our want, our need, what we believe in at the very core. So I thought, okay, well, there's no going outside of myself to find character and story. I have to go deeply, I have to interrogate deeply within myself. So this took a process that was very different for me than it was for Color Purple, which I was shooting right before, or Rustin, which I had to finish up after. Very different performances, and this required something else. This required more soul work. So I think that maybe that's what Sean is saying. At least that's what I'd like to believe it is.
I like that. I like that. In the film, your character Divine G takes Divine I, played by Clarence Macklin, under his wing when he joins in the RTA program, and they build, a really beautiful brotherly relationship over time. And I'm curious, when you were younger, coming up as an actor, did you have a mentor like that?
I didn't have a mentor like that, but the closest person I could say that I found was Sean San Jose, who's my
Mm,
actual best friend.
there you go.
We began our journeys. He was in one of the very first shows that I was in the San Francisco Bay Area. We did a show called The Yellow Boat at Berkeley Repertory Theater. It was a touring show for young audiences, and we literally played best friends as well. and it was a show about HIV/AIDS prevention, and he was a character who suffered a blood transfusion, and I played his best friend. And from there, we started to sort of inspire one another, challenge each other, and the way we were building our art. We have all these in-depth conversations about art and about theater and about its impact. We both started our theater companies at the same time. His went on and continued to become one of the most groundbreaking theaters of San Francisco called Campo Santo. And then eventually he became an artistic leader at Intersection for the Arts. And now he runs the Magic Theater, which is the legendary theater where Sam Shepard came from. So he is, I think, when it comes down to it, he's probably more of that figure, that character that you're asking, who was most influential to me. I think that it was somebody who I know that we were very much on par with each other, but we also are willing to challenge what each other thinks and how we do it and what the practice of what we do is. So that's why I also needed him on this film. I thought he would have an incredible impact not only on the film but on me, and so I needed sort of that anchor on the film, and I think Sean delivers one of the most seminal performances as Mike. I think he does beautiful work in the film.
Absolutely. It's so touching, and the relationship that you guys have on screen, that real life
Hmm.
friendship absolutely comes through. Um, you were talking about how you two came up together, and how you talk a lot about how theater and how it affects your lives and how your lives affect the work. And I've been there as well, like on both sides of this theatrical power as a young performer learning, and then as a more seasoned performer teaching and working with kids and people in adverse situations. And I'm wondering if you could talk about how you have seen arts programs like RTA make a positive influence on people in your own life.
Hmm. The Just in particular with these men who were at Sing Sing, many of them, and these people who have gone through this program, getting to know Clarence Divine I. Macklin, Sean Dino Johnson, JJ Vasquez, and many others. I, I see what they clung to, which was their humanity, and they needed a program like this for someone to come in and say, "Hey, it sounds really hokey," and I think, and I'm so not this person believing that, oh, art saves lives. I mean, it can be such a blanket statement, but I actually do believe it's true. It really actually does, because I've witnessed it. I've witnessed it for these men who felt like they literally have said, if I had arts programs like this, if I had programs like this that helped me do this work earlier in my life, I probably would have never gone down this path in any way, or been in this predicament or situation, whatever it is. But I think I know that it's useful because I also know that, like, I'm a beneficiary of that statement. I'm like, I know that when my parents both passed away in 2006, the only thing that was keeping me afloat was art, was making art, was creating art, was having somewhere to go and be responsible to something, and being able to interrogate and do the deep work of the human spirit to help me see another way through. So I did the show called Passing Strange. It's a sidebar. It's Passing Strange. My mother died before the audition. Right after I auditioned, I eventually had to go do the show in Berkeley and in New York City, and then eventually went to Broadway. And Spike Lee filmed it. This is 3 years of having this art, which was literally about a boy who loses his mother.
Yeah, I was going
Okay,
to say it's a little life
so
imitating art here.
absolutely. So, and I've always believed that the art that I'm seeking is also seeking me at the time that I need it. So I needed this art to help transform me. And so by the time we finished our run on Broadway, I had come through all the darkness and I found light in a different way. But I know I have that art to help me with that and teach me that. And if I didn't have it, I don't know where I'd be, to be honest. I would just be, my parents died 6 months apart in one year, and they're my best friends. I think that I was untethered and I clung to art like these men cling to RTA to say, it's my parachute. It's going to help save me. Cling on to it.
It's really, really beautiful. You you're on set with these men who have been in this program together. They maybe know each other through all these experiences. They're coming back to a place that has is very loaded emotionally, I can imagine. What was what was the vibe like on set? What were you all doing? How were you bonding when you weren't filming?
I think the clearest example of how things were offset is the breakdance scene. The breakdancing
Mm.
scene in the film is actually a devised scene that came up because of what we were doing off screen.
Oh
That we
wow.
were Yeah, that was actually something we were doing. We're breakdancing, talk about music. We're just talking. I mean, we're all like, 50 something year old men with a lot of shared history of like what we like music, like Salt and Pepper, Eric B. and Rakim. So we talked
Yeah.
about music, we talked about family, we talked about anything, but we're just connecting as men. And it was a very lighthearted, joyful situation, to be honest. And I think that it wasn't heavy because we knew the heavy work needed to happen on screen if there was heavy work to be had and to be a bit more vulnerable. But I think the thing that I knew that we needed was a sense of camaraderie and a grounded, shared space of a brain trust of we're just human beings, we're just men of a certain age, and what connects us. And there's all these things that connect us deeply: music, art, Shakespeare. Uh, you know what I mean? So we connected that way. And I think when we got to, it's funny, there was that scene, when that scene came up, it was actually a written scene. And I was frustrated with it because I was like, I don't think this is doing what you wanted to do, Greg. And he said, well, what do you think it is? I said, what do you want to get out of the scene? He said, it's just a scene with all these guys bonding. I said, well, I think, how about if we did what we did outside? That's just bonding. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to bond with language. You can bond physically and with something that's common, like breakdancing. And that's what we did. That's what showed up on screen.
I love that. It also reminds me of there's a line in the film that Brent has about how in this program everyone is being open and vulnerable with each other, which is something that men don't normally do. And that feels like something that is so important. It's just one more example of how these arts programs are so important to men, especially in these types of situations.
I think so. It's funny. I've always been one of those guys that always wants to explore like sort of a men's group, like, going off into, it sounds very, ancient in a way, but going off to the woods with men to just talk about what it's like to be men, or to talk about what we want, what we need, our bodies, you name it, to make us stronger men. Because a lot of times we don't have the tools because there's so many things imposed on us as men in society that takes us away from actual our exactly who we are or can be. So, and it affects our families, it affects our communities, it affects our wives and our husbands, and you know what I mean. Instead of having this forum to say that, oh, we can deconstruct all these ideas of what being male is and really investigate um, the soul. You know what I mean? So I think that programs like this, I mean, once they found these tools, they're like, I think they wanted to protect it. There's a line that Sean Dino Johnson says in our film. He said, because he's really talking to Divine Eye at the moment, who's really,
Mm.
you know, anxious about this dude walking behind him, which is in prison code, you don't do that. And he's like, don't take this away from us. We're here to become human again. And it means everything to him because he recognizes that he was taught a lie about what being a man is,
Mm.
and he's actively doing the work to become, to have all the feelings, to be sensitive, to be emotional, to be soft at times, and all of that has nothing to do with being masculine. It's just about being human, and he values it deeply.
Just another example of so many beautiful moments in this film.
Mm.
I know we're coming up on the end of our time together, but it's something that I was really interested in watching this film is, that part of your performance is that you prove that actors can play someone who has a very different lived experience than their own.
Hmm.
But you're also working on this film with so many men who actually have that lived experience. So I'm wondering how you think a film or piece of theater changes when you do have someone who has a lived experience performing a part.
I think there are two things. I think that knowing that I needed to be the center of this film and sort of anchor the film, you need an actor of a certain skill that can help navigate that. And so, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the people with lived experience who also have a practice of craft also can live in that space as well. But I think you with this film we needed both. I think that there are I'm a fan of people who have lived experience, but I'm also a fan of people who are also um, career practitioners of
Mhm.
this as well, out there professionally. I think that there's something to be said for both cases. I know for me, it was important for me to sort of not be seen as sort of this Hollywood actor with these guys, but to actually, listen, I know my skill set. I know what I can play. And I know I can play loud, noisy characters. This required me, and plus the character of John Divine G required me to be a bit more subtle and sort of recede a bit more. Because I also wanted to make sure that these men's stories went to the forefront. That was very conscious. It was like, no, it this doesn't require me to be the starring actor. This requires me to be a part of an ensemble and let everyone's engine function in an extraordinary way. So I think I know that that's what I could give as someone who knows how to calibrate and form an arc, because this is something, and not just raw abilities and a lived experience. You need an anchor. For our film in particular, you need an anchor to help these gentlemen along as well and show what we can craft and how we can craft it. You do need that center, and I was very proud to be that center. And I like to say that I know that I was looking after not only these men but their stories, and also how we crafted it with my director Greg Quidar and writer Clint Bentley.
Again, it's really beautiful performance and a beautiful film with a really powerful, important message. Thank you so much for your work on the
Thank
film.
you.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. It's been really wonderful.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Daniel.
Appreciate you, Colman, always.